Alright, hello everyone. So it has been a very long time not seeing you guys for a while. And anyway, so today we will be starting off with the first topic in C7. So for yesterday, I have already assigned you to finish Unit 7.0, but so that one actually was not a formal topic in C7 because I've expect like most of you guys you have learned latitude and longitude when you were in primary school or like in junior form. But if you have forgotten some of the ideas, just feel free to go back to that unit, and also you can just go to the Google Drive and try your best and to learn all the things over again. I would say latitudes and longitudes, they are key concepts in this chapter. And this chapter is called global warming, and sometimes we use another phrase to express it that is called climate change. And global warming, we're just talking about the temperature, which is increasing, right? And we know that it has been increasing a lot. And and we know for climate change is a little bit different from global warming. And climate change actually is talking about the whole phenomenon. Even some of the places, they their temperatures has have been increasing, but they still have like other kind of impacts. For example, the precipitation is getting more and more. Sometimes it creates flooding right in the region, and we know that some of the places they are suffering from droughts. But anyway, so before we are starting off, one thing they have to bear in mind is, so if I'm talking too fast or sometimes you couldn't understand some of the concepts, feel free to pause your video or you can just watch part of the video over again. I think that is the biggest advantage of learning online. And I know that properly when I am having my lesson in front of you guys, sometimes it's quite hard for you to replay, and also for you can sometimes I know that's quite difficult for you guys to ask me to repeat some of the things over again. But if it is like on the online platform, you don't have to worry about this. You can just replay all the things over and over again, and then you can just get those concepts until actually you can understand. So before we are starting the new topic, make sure you have this one with you. This one is the notes for your unit 7.1. If you couldn't print it out, then could you please just use a piece of paper to mark down all of your notes? And this one will be very, very useful. And at least you are jotting something that is highly related to lesson, and actually it can consolidate your learning as well. So let's get started. So for today's topic, it's just talk about is our Earth getting warmer and warmer. So the lesson objectives of today is like, so I'll give you a definition of global warming. The second one, we talk about some of the arguments. We know some people they agree with the phenomenon of global warming and climate change, but some of the people, for example, like the U.S. President Donald Trump, actually he has been disagreeing with um, the phenomenon of global warming, and he always says that like a lot of scientists are just making up the story and they just want to deceive people because like they want to get some extra funds for their scientific research only. So that's why it's quite essential for us to get like whether global warming is true or not. And for the final one is later on we will have some activities that you can try to explain like whether there is global warming or not. So the judgment will leave it to you guys. Maybe after you have finished this lesson, you think that global warming is fake. It doesn't really matter. If you think global warming actually is real, then that's perfect. But I know maybe there is variation like among us, and maybe like in our class, some of you guys you think that that is true, but some of you guys you don't think that is true. It is totally alright. Yeah. So I just want to show you something um, that is really scientific, and also I give you like some insight right into this problem. So there are two pictures right here. The first one, I bet most of you guys you'll know about this, right? So this one is cattle ranching. It's a very common activity in tropical rainforests, especially like in Brazil. We have learned it in C6 already. And we know that those cattle, they make a lot of CO2, and all of the animals, they have to do respiration, right? So that's why it would create a lot of um, extra carbon dioxide. And we know that like when they're doing their digestion, actually they will create methane as well. And for the second picture, as you can see, this one is in Maldives, right? And Maldives is a very famous country for holiday makers, for people to go on vacation. But we know that they are facing a very big problem. Some of their islands are submerging, disappearing because of the global sea level rising. So for today, actually we'll try to look into these problems. So a little starter for you guys. So I know this is pretty hard for you guys to walk around the classroom because you are staying at home right now, right? So what you need to do is I will just show you all of the evidence right ahead, and then you try to finish the starter by yourself. If I'm talking too fast, or if you don't really have enough time to finish the whole thing, it doesn't matter. You can just pause the video, yeah, and if you couldn't understand some of the concept, or if you want to hear my explanation again, then you can just replace part of the video. All right, so let's get started. So for the first evidence, this one is talking about the annual global ocean temperatures. So you can see the changes right here, right? So from 1880 to 2012, we know that general speaking, the trend is getting higher and higher, it's going up, right? Though we know that there are ups and downs, and these ups and downs, we call it fluctuation. So the verb is fluctuate. And this one is a very common word in global warming, because like we know that our mother nature actually is not in a very stable environment. And we know that there are lots of factors making the climate and weather changing. So that's why the trend won't be like going up continuously, and actually there are some drops and there are some increases as well. So after you have already looked into this piece of evidence, so what is your thought? Do you believe that actually there's global warming? So can you just write your answer right in your paper? So if you need more time, you can just pause this video. If you don't need more time, you can just continue with watching this, and I will carry on. So for the second piece of evidence, this one is pretty easy. So as you can see, the yellow boundary actually is showing you the historical boundary of the sea ice cap in Arctic Ocean. But right now, as you can see, the sea ice extent into 2012 actually has been shrinking, and the size has been shrinking, like I think it's around 30 to 40% already. And one thing that I want to tell you guys is quite interesting. Here is Greenland. Here's Greenland, and no matter you know it or not, Greenland is the biggest island in the world, and it is always covered with ice, and it's part of the Arctic as well. So, do you think actually global warming is true right here when you look at this evidence? So write your answer in your paper. So evidence 3, this one is very simple. So we know that in past, as you can see, the photo is in black and white. That means like it was a long time ago, maybe 100 years ago. So in the past, the glacier actually look like this, but right now, as you can see, like here the white color showing you the size of the glacier, and right now you can see like some of the glacier has already melted. So can you write your answer in your paper? So evidence number 4, this one is talking about the average sea levels. So as you can see, the general trend Is it increasing or decreasing? So we know that it's increasing, right? So why actually there was rising sea level? Anyone you know the reasons? And we know that that is quite interesting that there are two main reasons making the sea level rising. The first one is because we know that the glacier and also ice, they are melting, right? Especially the ones in Antarctica and also in the Arctic Ocean as well. And another one, most of you guys, you didn't think about it. We know that like if any objects, when they get heated, and then the size and the volume actually will be larger than before. So that is something that we call expansion. So even for water, if it's getting hotter, then the size of the water will also get expanded as well. So that's why it makes this, actually it makes the sea level even higher and higher. So for evidence number 5, so this one is talking about the number of the natural hazards. So this one is talking about typhoon, and this one is talking about temperature anomaly. So as you can see, if it's in red color, that means it's hotter than before. If it's like in blue color, that means it's colder than before. So do you think these kind of extreme weather events, they are related to climate change? So write your answer in your paper. So for evidence number 6, so these are some of the examples of the animals. Actually, they are facing a lot of obstacles when they are staying in their own habitats. So we know that polar bears, they are one of the victims of climate change. Do you think there is climate change actually when you look at like polar bears are starving during long summer months because like the ice they relied on to hunt for food melts earlier, and we know that for most of the polar bears they live on land or sometimes they just live on top of ice. But if there is no ice, how come they have their own habitat? And also here is talking about another famous animal that is called the American pika. And for these kind of mouse, all right, actually they usually live in Canada or in Greenland as well. And actually it is saying that they are forced to move higher and higher altitudes and to find the tolerable alpine temperature it calls home. That means they have to go to the mountains. They have to go to the mountains to find their own home because they have already got used to the cold weather. But if they stay downhill, actually it's too warm for them. So that's why they have to find another place. So do you think actually there is global warming? So write your answer in your paper. So for evidence number 7, so this one, actually for this piece of evidence, I copied it from a very famous scientist, and that scientist was working in NASA, and NASA is a very famous organization in the US, and they are so dedicated to researching the phenomena of global warming and climate change, and especially when they do the research of the history of the change of the temperature, what they have found that is quite interesting is that so starting from industrial revolution, actually the temperature has been rising like dramatically. So here is the history, just a little bit. I mean, like it's not a very long piece of history, but it's just a part of the history of the Earth, and we know that over a million years, and we know that 2,000 years it's just a very small part of it. But when you look at the graph, you will see here the increase actually is very astonishing. So do you think actually there is climate change? So write your answer in your paper. So for evidence 8, I try to find something that is up to date, and I think this one, actually most of you guys you have heard of it, and this one is Australia bushfire in 2020, and actually it just happened. And as you can see in this photo, like there is a kangaroo, and the kangaroo actually was running, all right, and also escaping from the fight as well. And we know that there were lots of animals dying because of this event. And some of the scientists have found that because there was climate change and it makes the rainfall um, come very, very late. So, do you think actually this event is originate from climate change? So, try to write your answer in your paper. So, after you have finished all of the writing and your starter, then before we're getting to the answer, though, so right now we will see like some of the changes of the global temperature first. So right now here is a little task for you. So what you need to do is like in DSE, most of the time they will give you a lot of figures. They will give you a lot of graphs as well. So what you need to do is you just have to look at those graphs and then you have to present your ideas in an organized and also detailed manner, and especially you have to use the relevant geographical terms when you're answering the question. So here is a very common question that they always ask. They give you like a graph talking about the increasing temperature over the world over this period. And then what you need to do is you just have to tell me a general trend and also quote some numbers, and then you have to tell me the difference between the highest point and also the lowest point as well. So can you just spend like around 3 minutes to try to write the answers by yourself? So you can just pause this video and then you wait for 3 minutes and then you try to finish all of the things right in your notes or in your piece of paper, and then later on we will check the answer. So the first point that you can write is, so we know that the trend, if it's going up and down, we call it fluctuation. So we know that it has been fluctuating for a very long time. And the second thing is, we know that in the first stage, before the late 1930s, and we know that temperature was below the average. But starting off from 1940s, we know that like the temperature had been fluctuating around the average. But we know that recently there is a very big problem since the late 1970s, and we know that a lot of country actually they have been developing their own economy, and during this period, actually, it was right after World War One and World War Two, so that's why most of the countries they were very very peaceful. So that's why it makes like a lot of industry developed in different regions, and we know that uh, because of these things, and temperature has been rising continuously about the average. So remember, you have to tell me the general trend, and also you can chop up those periods and talk about like the differences as well. So we know that the global average temperature has increased by around 0.78 degrees Celsius. So don't just say like increasing. You have to tell me the difference as well. All right. So that is the technique for DSE. So we can conclude that that is something that we call global warming. So right now we have to think of, is global warming a fact or is something that is fictional? So some of the people, they think that global warming is not true because they just think that the fluctuation of global temperature is just very normal. For example, like when they look at the data from the NASA and also from different scientists, and they have found that there was a peak of temperature change right before, I mean like 1,300,000 years ago. So that's why some of the people they think that maybe right now these years we are in another peak instead of having the problem of global warming. And some of the people they just argue that 1,300,000 years ago we didn't have any kind of industry like at that moment. So that's why how come there was any kind of global warming at that moment. So it would it won't be it would be like impossible like at that moment there was global warming. So that's why people they argue that maybe we are in the second peak only. And then some of the people they also argue that like in these years we know that there is scientific advancement, right? But we know that in the past the climatic data actually wasn't very precise and wasn't very accurate as well. So that's why maybe there were a lot of mistakes, there were lots of errors when they were measuring the temperature, when they were measuring precipitation, and even some of the people they argue that actually the scientists at that moment didn't have enough data to back themselves up. So that's why those people they are not convinced that global warming has been happening. And there are three more reasons behind, I could say. The first one is the complexity of the climatic system. That means when you look at climate, actually it's a very big term, especially when you look into the details of climate. You have to count like precipitation, sunlight, clouds, a lot of things in. So that's why people they keep saying that climate is something really really complicated, and there are a lot of factors affecting one another like greatly. So that's why some people they argue that it's so hard for us to judge whether global warming is happening when we are just looking into some of the factors only. And the second thing is we know that the climate in the earth is very complex, it's very complicated. So that's why it will be very challenging for the computer models to predict the future as well. And for number three, because like we have different sources of data, and some of the data they are from some of the scientists, and some of the data they are from the satellites, and some of the data they are from the historical evidence. So that's why it's impossible for us to say like for every single piece of evidence was reliable enough to show the whole thing. So that's why some of the people they said that actually global warming might not be true because some of the data is not very reliable. So here is a very very interesting um, um, theory, and this theory actually was talking about like why some people think that global warming is not real, and these mechanism is called feedback mechanism, because there is a dilemma, there is a contradictory statement right here. We know that if there are clouds, and clouds actually are making the climate warmer, so if the clouds are making the climate warmer and warmer, and actually it facilitates the whole process of doing precipitation and doing transpiration, and also it will make the climate even like more humid as well. And the second thing is we know that if it's like more humid and there's like more transpiration, more evaporation, actually it will make more clouds in turn. So that is like a problem of um, there is a chicken laying an egg, and then an egg can can turn into a chicken, but we don't really know which one actually is the start. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that's why some of the people they feel so confused when they are thinking of the feedback mechanism. So maybe you can watch this video by yourself and try to learn more about the feedback mechanism. So right now I will give you a conclusion of all of the evidence that we have been talking about. So what you need to do is you just have to jot down all of the notes right in your paper as a conclusion of today's lesson. The first one is we know that when you look at the changes in annual global ocean temperatures, we know that the temperatures of ocean have been increasing right now. So this one is the first piece of evidence talking about why actually there has been a problem of global warming. And the second one, we know that the extent of Arctic sea ice is decreasing right now. And this one is very obvious. And most of the time, we're talking about ice melting. But remember, don't just say melting ice. You have to say like where you can find ice melting. And you can find it in the Arctic, and also you can find it in the Antarctica as well. And the third one is talking about glacier. So remember, ice caps and glacier, they are totally different. So for ice caps, for icebergs, actually they are just right at the North Pole or maybe like at the South Pole. But for glaciers, actually they are on hilly mountains. All right, and their altitude actually is very high. That means they are on highlands, and we know that the glacier they are retreating. That means like you can see the boundary here, right? The boundary, and the boundary of the snow of the glacier actually is going backward, and it's retreating to the summit, it's retreating to the peak. And sometimes for this boundary we call it snow line. All right. And for number four, we know that the global average sea level is rising as well. And this one is a very obvious evidence showing you guys actually there has been a problem of global warming. And number five, this one is talking about extreme weather events. And they are more and more frequent right now. And typhoons, hurricanes, droughts, and hill fires as well. These are the examples of extreme weather events. And for number six, so we know that there will be extinction of animals, and also there will be destruction of their habitats as well, because they are losing their own habitats. And we know that some of them they are under a very big threat of extinction. And if we are not going to do anything, and actually maybe they will be extinct in one day. So the plenary of today is, right at this moment, do you think that global warming is real or fake? So it's quite hard for us to like do this activity online. So what you need to do is, can you just write a paragraph right in your paper, and then you just tell me like whether you think climate change is real or not. So if you think climate change is still real, then you can tell me a reason, give me some of your evidence to show yourself uh, why actually you think that is true. And if you think that climate change is something that is fake, then can you just write your answers in your paper as well? And then you can also write some evidence, because we have learned some reasons like why some people have been saying that global warming is fake. So maybe this lesson has already changed your mind when you're looking at the problem of global warming. So just take your time and then write something about your stance on climate change. So after you have already written your stance and also all of the evidence, then you can also watch these video clips and to see like whether you will change your stance or not. And these two video clips, they're very meaningful, and some of them they're very scientific, and some of them they're using like different angles when they are looking into the problem of climate change and also global warming as well. So that's it for today's lesson. So try to take your time to watch all of the videos. If you have anything that you don't really understand, just feel free to ask me by email or by WhatsApp. And also feel free to replay the whole video again if you want to learn some of the concepts like over again as well. So thank you so much for your time. Alright, see you guys in the next unit.